There was a man in his early 70s who believed he was doing just fine. He wasn't unhealthy. He wasn't inactive. His days felt normal, predictable, comfortable. And that was the problem. Because over time, he realized something strange. Nothing in his life was getting worse. But nothing was getting better either. His energy stayed the same. His body felt the same. Everything was flat until one day. His doctor said something that caught his attention. Your body is adapting, but not in the way you think. And that's when he realized his routine wasn't maintaining his health. It was quietly limiting it. As a retired physician, I've seen something happen quietly to many people after the age of 50. And often, they never realize it until much later. The body is designed to adapt. That's one of its greatest strengths. It responds to what it experiences regularly, day after day. If you gently challenge it, it becomes stronger. If movement becomes limited, the body slowly adjusts to doing less. And this process is incredibly quiet. Most people settle into routines that feel comfortable and predictable. They wake up at the same time, sit in the same chair, move in the same way, and follow familiar patterns that feel safe. At first, this stability feels reassuring. It feels manageable, even responsible. But over time, the body begins to plateau. I remember one gentleman in his early 70s who described his daily life in very simple terms. Each morning, he would sit near the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight filter through the curtains. Much like the peaceful morning scenes many of us enjoy. Later, he might take a short walk, always along the same path, at the same pace, for the same length of time. From the outside, it looked healthy, but inside the body, something subtle was happening. Without variation, without gentle challenge, the body systems were not being encouraged to improve. Muscles were being used, yes, but not pushed. The heart was working, but not stimulated to grow stronger. Balance, flexibility, and endurance were simply being maintained at a minimal level, not declining quickly, but not improving either. And over many years, this quiet plateau can influence how the body ages. Not through sudden illness, but through gradual underperformance. A slow reduction in what the body is capable of doing. That's why understanding how daily patterns affect longevity is so important, especially after the age of 50. The man who followed his predictable routine didn't believe there was any problem. In his mind, consistency meant stability, and stability meant health. That belief is very common and understandable. But after hearing his doctor mention that his body was adapting, he became curious. Not worried, just curious. And sometimes, curiosity is the first step toward better health. So he began paying attention to his daily patterns. What he noticed was surprisingly simple. His days rarely changed. The same morning routine, the same amount of walking, the same amount of sitting, the same level of effort every single day. There was movement, but no variation. There was activity, but no challenge. So he decided to experiment, not with drastic changes, but with small ones. On some mornings, instead of his usual short walk, he extended it by just 5 extra minutes. Nothing dramatic, just walking a little farther through the park, noticing the trees, the fresh air, the rhythm of his breathing. Much like the gentle walking scenes many older adults enjoy. On other days, he added light stretching. after waking, simple movements similar to calm morning stretches, or yoga routines that help loosen stiff joints. At first, it felt unnecessary, even slightly uncomfortable. But he continued, and over time, something interesting began to happen. His body responded, his energy improved, his steps felt lighter. He noticed that climbing stairs required less effort. Even small tasks around the house began to feel easier. What stood out most was this: the changes had been small, very small. He hadn't transformed his lifestyle overnight. He hadn't joined a gym or taken on intense workouts. He had simply introduced variation, small differences that gently encouraged his body to adapt. And that, in many cases, is enough to begin changing the aging process in a positive direction. One of the quiet dangers I've observed over decades in medicine is stagnation. Not illness, not injury, but stagnation. It happens when daily life becomes so predictable that the body no longer receives signals to improve. Everything continues to function, but at a minimal level, and over time, that matters more than most people realize. When the body is not challenged, it has no reason to adapt. Muscles maintain only basic strength. The heart continues working, but without increased efficiency. Balance remains stable, but not sharpened. From the outside, everything appears fine. But inside, resilience begins to fade. I often explain this to patients using a simple example. Imagine a person who spends most of the afternoon sitting on the couch, watching television, occasionally checking their phone. Scenes many of us recognize from everyday life. There is nothing wrong with resting. Rest is necessary. But when sitting becomes the dominant activity, day after day, the body quietly adapts to inactivity. Joints stiffen slightly, muscles weaken gradually. Energy feels flatter, not dramatically, but consistently. Over the years, this reduced resilience becomes noticeable in subtle ways. A short walk feels more tiring than before. Carrying groceries requires more effort. Recovering from minor illness takes longer. And perhaps most importantly, confidence in the body begins to decrease. This is the part many people overlook. When the body has not been trained to handle variation, even small challenges can feel overwhelming. A longer walk, climbing stairs, or standing for extended periods may feel more difficult than expected. Not because aging is unavoidable, but because adaptation was missing. Routine feels safe, comfortable, predictable, but without small challenges built into that routine, the body slowly forgets what it is capable of doing. And that is how stagnation quietly influences longevity. Not through sudden decline, but through the slow loss of resilience. The encouraging part, and this is something I often remind people, is that improving this pattern does not require extreme effort. It begins with small variations, very small ones, doing slightly more than what feels normal, not dramatically more, just enough to signal to the body that change is happening. For example, if you normally take a short walk each morning, try extending it by a few minutes once or twice a week. Walk a little farther into the park. Choose a path with gentle slopes. Let your body experience something slightly different from the usual routine. These simple walking variations, the kind many seniors practice while enjoying fresh air and morning sunlight, can stimulate meaningful physical adaptation over time. Another powerful addition is light movement after waking. Gentle stretching, slow arm movements, calm breathing exercises, similar to basic yoga or relaxation routines, often performed in quiet morning spaces. These movements do not require strength or athletic ability. They simply encourage flexibility, circulation, and joint mobility, all essential elements of healthy aging. But physical variation is only part of the picture. Mental variation matters too. Learning something new, reading a book, solving puzzles, reflecting quietly while looking through old photographs, keeps the brain engaged. These reflective moments, like sitting thoughtfully by a window or reading in silence, help maintain mental sharpness and emotional balance. Consistency is still important, but within that consistency, there should be moments of challenge, moments of effort, moments that remind the body and the mind that adaptation is still possible. Because when small challenges are repeated regularly, the body becomes more responsive, more capable, more resilient, even well into later decades of life. One of the most important lessons I learned during my years in medicine is this: health is not simply about maintaining what you already have. It is about continuing to adapt, continuing to engage with life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Many people settle into routines that feel safe. Familiar meals, familiar movements, familiar schedules. There is comfort in predictability, and comfort is not a bad thing. But comfort alone is not enough to support long-term vitality. The body needs stimulation, not extreme effort, not exhausting routines, but consistent, gentle variation, the kind that encourages movement, awareness, and engagement with the world. I often think of the simple image of an older adult stepping outside in the morning. Sunlight filtering through trees, air feeling fresh, movement beginning slowly but steadily. A quiet walk, a stretch beside the window, a moment of calm reflection before the day begins. These small actions may seem insignificant, but over time, they shape the future of the body. Because the body reflects what it is asked to do. When it is asked to remain still, it adapts to stillness. When it is asked to move, to stretch, to challenge itself just a little, it adapts to strength. And sometimes, the difference between staying the same and improving does not come from major life changes. It comes from the smallest decisions, repeated daily, an extra step, a longer walk, a new movement, a slightly different routine. These quiet changes, when practiced consistently, can support strength, resilience, and longevity in ways that many people never fully appreciate. And that is the quiet pattern that protects lifespan, not through intensity, but through gentle, daily adaptation.